3 years ago, she stood over our granite kitchen island and told me she needed space to find herself. I nodded like a fool, clutching a chipped mug I didn't even like, and asked if this had anything to do with the late-night calls from someone saved as Melanie. She laughed, actually laughed, and said I was being paranoid. That was the last real conversation we had. I didn't scream. I didn't dig. I just evaporated. Took my name off the lease, let the divorce papers arrive without comment, and moved 2 states away to a town where no one knew how easily I could be replaced. For 3 years, I lived in silence. Ate alone. Worked remote gigs under aliases. Bought clothes from discount bins and watched entire TV series without saying a word out loud. That kind of quiet changes you. Then last Thursday, out of pure financial desperation, I agreed to help a former coworker photograph a corporate gala in downtown Chicago. Nothing special, just a sea of synthetic smiles, overpriced suits, and the scent of catered shrimp. I hadn't even unpacked my camera fully when I saw her. She was at the center of it all, laughing in a red dress that looked like it cost more than my rent. Her hair was shorter, sharper. She looked powerful, confident, exactly the version of herself she said I'd always held back. But when her eyes met mine, across the buffet table, past the cocktail glasses and networking badges, she stopped breathing. And then came the tears. Real ones. Ugly ones. Not polite sobs. The kind of crying that makes people turn away in secondhand embarrassment. She dropped her champagne. It shattered. Conversations halted. And all I could think was, she wasn't crying when I left. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body locked up like I was the one who'd been exposed, not her. Around us, the gala tried to resume its rhythm. Waiters rushed in with cloths and apologies. Soft jazz resumed in the background. And her coworkers pretended not to notice the spectacle unraveling at the center of the room. But she just stood there, trembling, mascara bleeding into the corners of her eyes like ink and water. And I watched. I hadn't seen her face in over 1,000 days, but somehow I still remembered every contour. The small scar on her jaw she always covered with foundation. The way her left eye closed ever so slightly slower than the right when she blinked. She used to call it her built-in wink. Now it just looked tired. She didn't say my name, didn't rush toward me, didn't even ask why I was there. She just turned, wobbled on those ridiculous heels she used to mock on other women, and disappeared through the exit doors like the fire alarm had gone off. I should have let her go, but something pulled me, some ghost of who I used to be. Still seeking closure, I told myself I no longer needed. So I followed. Down the marble hallway, past the coat check, into the cold air outside. She was leaning against a parking meter, one hand clutching her phone like it could save her. Arlo, she finally whispered. That name. No one calls me that anymore. Arlo Lowell Turner. I stopped going by my first name after the divorce. Started signing things L. Turner, just to forget how she used to whisper it when we were alone. I stepped closer, unsure if she was about to hit me or hug me. She did neither. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice cracking. How, why now? I didn't answer. I just pulled the camera strap off my neck and held it out like proof of existence. Freelance work, I muttered. Didn't know you'd be here. That was a lie. As soon as I saw the gala invite with her company's logo in the bottom corner, I knew she'd be there. And I still showed up. Not to confront her. I'm not that brave. I just wanted to see who she became after me. Turns out, she became the kind of woman who cried in a $700 dress at the sight of a man she left behind like he was spare change. She stared at me like I'd clawed my way out of a grave. You look so different, she said. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said the dumbest thing possible. I cut sugar. She covered her mouth and actually smiled through the tears. You're still a weirdo. And just like that, it hit me. She thought this was a reunion. A chance encounter meant to lead to some redemptive moment where I'd confess how much I missed her, how I never stopped loving her, how maybe we could try again. She had no idea how broken I really was. How many nights I'd sat in silence, wondering how long it had taken for her to move on. And then I said something I hadn't planned, something that cracked whatever fantasy she'd built in her head. I saw you. Her smile vanished. Saw me when? That night. In the hallway. Phone call. Shirt off. Someone named Melanie. You said I was a ghost in my own home. Silence. Dead, cold silence. She backed up a step. You were spying on me? I nodded. No. I was living there. You just forgot. The words came out flat. No anger. No performance. I wasn't trying to win. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I just wanted her to know. I knew everything. And maybe that I always had. The silence between us out there on that curb was unlike any silence I'd ever experienced. It wasn't awkward. It was burial level. Like something just got lowered into the ground between us, and neither of us wanted to say the eulogy. She looked down at the pavement as if searching for a timeline. That was, "You were home that night?" I didn't answer. She already knew. Her question wasn't really a question. It was a desperate attempt to rewind the tape to a version of events where maybe she could still pretend she hadn't been caught, hadn't been exposed for exactly who she was in that moment, whispering into her phone, laughing at a joke I would never be allowed to hear, wearing a stranger's button-down like it was second skin. She swallowed hard and took a shaky breath. It wasn't what it looked like. I flinched. Not because I believed her, I didn't, but because it was such a lazy thing to say. After 3 years. After what it did to me. After what she chose. That's all she had? I almost laughed. Instead, I nodded. Okay. She blinked. Okay. Yeah, I said. Let's pretend it wasn't. Let's say it was something noble. Something complicated. Something I wouldn't understand. Arlo, come on in. You had someone in the house, Cassandra. Her eyes snapped up. I never used her full name unless something serious was happening, taxes, death, or betrayal. It sliced the air between us like a hot blade. You don't know the whole story, she said quickly, stepping toward me now. I could tell she was trying to gain ground, emotionally and physically. There were things you didn't see. Things I was going through. I tilted my head. And that man, was he part of your healing process? That one hit her. She blinked rapidly and crossed her arms, as if trying to fold into herself. I was lonely, Arlo, she whispered. That broke me. Lonely? I had spent 2 years planning our future, lining up a promotion I never took, putting aside money she never asked for. I offered everything I had, every piece of me, and she handed her vulnerability to someone else because I wasn't entertaining enough. I said nothing, and she took that as her cue to rewrite the story. I didn't know how to ask for what I needed, she said. You were always checked out. Checked out? I echoed. You mean like working 60 hours a week so you could chase your marketing firm dream while I held the rest of our life together? Grocery runs? Laundry? Vet appointments? The dishes that magically did themselves. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I became invisible to make space for you, I added. Turns out I did it too well. The truth is, I wasn't always the best husband. I was overly anxious. I asked too many questions. I stayed up late rereading old messages when she stopped saying goodnight. I became obsessed with fixing things she wouldn't admit were broken. But I never cheated. Not once. Not even emotionally. Every part of me was still hers, even when she stopped looking me in the eyes. Cassandra finally said, You could have told me. You could have fought for us. I did, I said quietly. You just weren't watching. And then we stood there, former lovers now separated by a chasm of quiet choices, missed signals, and one irreversible mistake. A black car pulled up to the curb. She glanced at it and back at me. My ride, she muttered. Of course it was. She opened the door, then hesitated. Are you happy? She asked, eyes glossy. I looked past her. Through her. No. But at least I'm not lying to myself anymore. And then I turned and walked away, camera slung over my shoulder, heart punching through my ribs. She let me leave. Again. I thought that was it. Closure, or whatever version of closure I was supposed to feel in a moment like that. But I hadn't even reached the parking garage before I heard the clicking of heels behind me, fast, urgent, uncoordinated. She was running. Cassandra, the woman who once told me she'd never chase anyone, was chasing me. Arlo, wait, please, she called out. I stopped, mostly out of disbelief. She caught up to me under the dim orange glow of a street lamp, chest heaving, face streaked with ruined makeup. It didn't make sense. This wasn't the woman I left behind. That version of her was controlled, composed, calculated. But now she looked like she'd been unraveled. I didn't expect to see you, she said, voice brittle. I didn't think I'd ever have to face you again. Yeah, I muttered. That was kind of the idea. She stepped closer. Too close. I could smell her perfume, the same one she wore when we went to her sister's wedding, the same one I found clinging to a shirt that wasn't mine the night I left. I need to explain, she said. Not for you. For me. I didn't stop her. That was my mistake. I didn't fall in love with him, she began. I don't even know if I liked him. It was attention, Arlo. I felt seen. You were always so busy trying to be perfect, and I felt like an accessory in my own marriage. That stung, not because she said it, but because part of me had feared it was true. I was trying too hard to fix everything, to be the reliable one. I thought being stable meant being good enough. He made me feel exciting, she continued. But it didn't last. I ended it weeks later. I wanted to tell you. I swear I did, but you were just gone. I let the silence stretch between us. I wasn't going to save her from it. I looked for you, she added quietly. Called hospitals. Old friends. Even your mother. That got my attention. My mother. She wouldn't talk to me, she said. Slammed the door in my face. Said if I cared that much, I never would have let you slip away. Good. At least someone still had my back. Cassandra sniffled, glanced away, then looked back at me with something I hadn't seen in her in years. Humility. I messed up, she said. I ruined the one thing that was ever stable in my life. And you didn't even yell. You just vanished. I shook my head. Because if I had yelled, you would have made me the villain. You'd have told everyone I was controlling or bitter. And I didn't want to spend another minute being painted as something I wasn't. She looked wounded. I never told anyone what happened. I didn't know how to explain it. You didn't have to explain it, I said. You just had to live with it. And clearly, you did. Her bottom lip trembled. She turned away for a second, composed herself, then whispered, I see you now. I really do. I almost believed her. But it was 3 years too late. The version of me she saw now, the thinner frame, the sharper jaw, the quiet confidence that came from absolute solitude, wasn't the man she left. That man was softer, more trusting, more easily bruised. She broke him. What stood in front of her now wasn't love waiting to be rekindled. It was memory turned to stone. I'm not coming back, Cassandra, I said firmly. She nodded slowly. I know. I'm not the same. I know that too. We stood in silence again, strangers pretending to grieve something mutual, when in reality, she had discarded me and only now realized the weight of what she'd lost. She stepped back. I hope you find someone who sees you. The way I didn't. I did, I replied. He's quieter now. Older. Wiser. But I finally see him too. I turned toward the garage. She didn't call after me this time. But I knew she was still watching. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I lay there in the unfamiliar guest room of my friend's condo, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, clumsy circles, replaying every word she'd said in that streetlight-soaked parking lot. It was surreal. After 3 years of imagining what I'd say to her, how I'd scream or fall apart or break down crying, none of that had happened. Instead, I had listened like a stranger. Quiet. Cautious. Watching her like she was a storm cloud I'd once lived beneath but now only observed from a safe, distant hill. And the worst part was, I still cared. Not about getting her back. That door had rotted off its hinges a long time ago, but about her. About what she'd become. About whether the version of her who stood in front of me sobbing was real, or just another mask for a new audience. I thought maybe I was finally over it. That I had buried the old me along with the hurt, the confusion, the aching silence. But walking back into that event, watching her lose it at the sight of me, feeling her tears cut through the air like confession, it had unearthed something I didn't know was still alive. Memories began clawing their way back, uninvited. The little ones. The humiliating ones. Like when I found a second toothbrush in the drawer she said belonged to her assistant, except her assistant's name was Corey and he had perfect white veneers. Or when I asked why she was wearing makeup to grab groceries at 11 p.m., and she smiled without blinking and said, because I like looking nice, is that a crime now? And I remembered the worst part, how often I believed her. I used to bend over backwards to rationalize her lies. I wasn't being fair. I was insecure. I was projecting. Maybe if I planned more date nights, sent more sweet texts, asked fewer questions, she'd stay. Or at least pretend better. But the truth was, she left me long before I left the house. I stayed gone the next day, even when she texted. Yes, she texted. At 8:17 a.m. sharp. Can we talk again before you leave town? I didn't answer. At 10:41 a.m. I know I have no right. I just don't want that to be the last conversation we ever have. No reply. Then at 1:03 p.m., she sent a photo. Not of herself. Not of us. A photo of an envelope. My handwriting. It read, "For when you're ready to stop pretending." I had left it on the kitchen counter the day I disappeared. She added one line under the photo. I never opened it. I couldn't. Something inside me shifted. I had assumed she tossed it out, unread and unbothered. That she walked away like I was some mildly unfortunate chapter in her glamorous life. But the fact that she still had that note, 3 years later, untouched, folded neatly in its envelope like it held something sacred, that hit me harder than anything she'd said in person. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then, against every instinct that told me to block her and run, I typed back. Fine. 1 hour. Lobby of the Quincy Hotel. Don't be late. No hearts. No emojis. No hope. Just a meeting. I got there early. She got there earlier. She looked like someone who hadn't slept either, not in days. Not well. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat across from me in that stiff leather armchair, knees crossed too tight, like she was trying to hold herself together with posture. I read it, she said immediately. Liar, I said. She bit her lip, looked down, and gave a tiny nod. Okay. I just read it this morning. After I saw you. What did it say? I asked, even though I knew exactly what it said. She reached into her purse and handed me the envelope. Same one. Same handwriting. Still sealed. I wanted you to open it now, she whispered. With me here? I took it. My fingers shook more than I expected. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. My handwriting. Simple. Barely more than a few sentences. You'll lie to yourself before you ever admit you lied to me. But one day, when the noise dies and you finally listen to the silence, you'll hear the echo of what you threw away. And maybe then, just maybe, you'll remember that I loved you through every single warning sign. When I finished reading, I looked up. She was crying again. But this time, she didn't speak. Because finally, there was nothing left to say. She reached for the paper after I finished reading it, fingertips brushing the edge as if it were too fragile to hold. Her nails were still painted in that muted wine shade she used to call conference room red. I used to joke it looked like dried blood, and she would roll her eyes and say, "You always have to ruin things with weird metaphors." Now, sitting across from her in the sterile hotel lobby, surrounded by fake plants and the smell of overbrewed coffee, she didn't make a sound. She just stared at the letter like it was a mirror she didn't want to look into. Did you ever actually miss me? I asked. She blinked, startled by the question, then sat back, folding her arms. I missed the version of you that didn't make me feel like I was failing all the time. That wasn't the answer I expected. Or wanted. So, no. I said quietly. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Cassandra sighed, looked off to the side, then leaned forward. You used to ask me questions constantly. You always needed reassurance. Always thought something was wrong. There was. Yes, she said quickly. But I didn't want to admit it. Not to myself. And definitely not to you. I narrowed my eyes. Why? Because then I'd have to choose. And I was terrified of choosing. I wanted both. The stability you gave me, and the attention I got from him. He made me feel alive. You made me feel safe. I sat back, feeling the weight of her words settle on me like dust in an old room no one had touched for years. I wasn't enough, I whispered. No, she said. You were too much. You loved me too hard, too purely. I didn't know what to do with that. I kept waiting for you to disappoint me, to give me a reason to leave that didn't make me the villain. But you never did. The moment hung between us like glass. Clear. Dangerous. I tried to make you the bad guy, she added. Every day, I'd twist something you said or did into proof that you didn't really get me. That you were smothering me. That you were too sensitive. But it was just guilt. I was already gone, emotionally. I was the one who changed. I didn't know what to say to that. Every part of me had prepared for a denial, a performance, a plea. I hadn't prepared for honesty. And she must have seen it in my face, because she smiled bitterly. You're still doing it. That thing where you want to fix everything, even if you're the one who's broken. I'm not broken. Yes, you are. You've just gotten good at hiding it. I hated how right she was. I had spent years pretending I was fine. I told people I left for personal growth, for peace, for clarity, but the truth was, I left because I couldn't take another moment of pretending she loved me when she didn't even like me anymore. And even now, as she sat in front of me peeling back the layers, I still felt that small, wounded part of myself that wanted to protect her from the full weight of what she'd done. You know, I said slowly, I used to hope you'd call. Every night for the first 6 months. I'd leave my ringer on, even when I slept. I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd realize you'd made a mistake. Cassandra looked down, fingers clenched in her lap. I did. Yeah? When? She hesitated. When I saw your toothbrush was gone. I blinked. That's it. I know how that sounds, she said quickly. But it was always there, even when I stopped seeing you. And then one morning it was gone, and I realized you weren't coming back. You hadn't yelled. You hadn't cried. You hadn't begged. You just left. And it made me realize how much I took for granted. She paused, looked me in the eye. You were the quietest goodbye I've ever received, and the loudest regret I carry. My throat tightened, not out of emotion, but exhaustion. Regret, finally spoken aloud, sounds less like redemption and more like a door creaking shut. So what now? I asked. She shrugged. I don't know. I just didn't want you to think I walked away without knowing what I lost. You didn't walk away, I corrected her. You stayed. I walked. And maybe that's what hurt her the most. That I was the one who finally acted. That I left her before she had the chance to play the role of the strong one, the survivor, the one who tells her friends, he was never really right for me anyway. She looked down again, pulled something from her coat pocket. A small photo. Us. Taken on our 3rd anniversary. Smiling. Young. Doomed. I kept this, she said, sliding it across the table. It's all I have left that still feels real. I didn't take it. I stood up slowly, carefully, as if leaving any faster might make her fall apart completely. You can keep it, I said. I don't need it anymore. I remember everything. Then I walked away, leaving her alone with the version of me she couldn't lie to anymore. I left her sitting there in that quiet hotel lobby, clutching a memory like it could make up for the life she once held in her hands and threw away. But I didn't turn around. I didn't offer closure. I didn't offer forgiveness. Not because I wanted to punish her. I just didn't have anything left to give her. The air outside felt cleaner than I remembered. Colder, too. Chicago nights always did carry a bite, but it felt sharper now, like it was daring me to keep walking, to keep choosing myself. That night, back in my friend's condo, I didn't replay the conversation in my head. I didn't write in my journal or pace or stare out a window. I just sat and breathed and realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit in 3 years. I was no longer in love with Cassandra. I had been in love with the idea of her, the one I fought to preserve while she kept slipping through cracks I refused to seal. But the real Cassandra? The one who smiled with secrets tucked behind her teeth and eyes that never quite stayed focused on me long enough to hold trust? I had left her long before my body did. I moved on after that night. Not in the romantic sense. I wasn't dating. Still haven't, if I'm being honest. But I did start living like a man who had already grieved. That encounter, as raw and jarring as it was, became a closing chapter. The version of me who wrote her letters, who left toothbrushes behind, who believed that love meant holding on even after it cut your hands, he was gone. I went home. Home now being a quiet 2-bedroom in a small Oregon town where people wave for no reason, and the coffee shop barista remembers your order after the 3rd visit. It's not exciting. It's not big. But it's mine. I planted vegetables in the backyard. I got a dog. Named him Huxley because it sounded like the kind of dog that would listen when I talked too much. And slowly, without realizing it, I started to reclaim pieces of the man I used to be before her. I picked up a camera again, but this time for myself. Not for events, not for money, not to stand behind while watching people live lives I couldn't touch. I started photographing trees, fog, elderly hands, rusted mailboxes, forgotten barns. There was something therapeutic about capturing things people overlooked. Maybe because I had spent years feeling overlooked myself. One afternoon, a local community college reached out and asked if I'd consider teaching an intro course. Apparently, one of my photos had gone semi-viral in a photography subreddit, a shot of an old woman looking at her reflection in a storefront window. The caption just read, "She doesn't look for beauty. She carries it." I said yes. First class, 12 students. Awkward, curious, kind. The kind of people who ask questions not to challenge, but to learn. The kind of people I hadn't allowed myself to be around since I disappeared. That first semester, I caught myself smiling more than usual. Not a big thing, but enough to notice. And then, about a month after that hotel conversation with Cassandra, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name in handwriting I could recognize even after the apocalypse. I didn't open it right away. It sat on my kitchen table for 3 days. I told myself I didn't care. But of course, curiosity wins. Inside was one page. A real letter, not a text in disguise. She'd written it by hand, signed it with her full name, not just Cass, like she used to. No flourishes. No manipulation. Just this. There's nothing I can say to undo what I broke. I don't expect forgiveness. But I needed you to know that the person I was with you was the most loved I've ever felt. I was too selfish to hold it. Too afraid to deserve it. I hope you find peace where I brought noise. I hope you find love where I left absence. And I hope, someday, someone holds you like you once held me, without condition. Thank you for teaching me what love looks like when it doesn't ask for applause. Cassandra. I folded the letter. Didn't cry. Just exhaled. She was right about one thing. I had loved her without condition. Even when she forgot. Even when she lied. Even when she disappeared while still sleeping next to me. But now? Now, I was loving something else, myself. Maybe clumsily. Maybe quietly. But finally, and fully. Months passed. The leaves outside my window went from amber to bare, and somewhere along the way, I stopped expecting anything from Cassandra. No more letters. No surprise texts. No apologies dressed up as questions. And surprisingly, I didn't miss it. Her silence, once unbearable, now felt like peace. A clean break. A breath I hadn't realized I was holding for years. I kept teaching at the college. Semester 2 brought more students, one of them, a woman named Elise, older than the rest, probably in her late 30s, who always lingered after class with the kinds of questions that weren't really about photography. One day, she asked me why I always took photos of things almost falling apart. I told her, because that's usually when they're most honest. She smiled in a way that didn't ask for anything. Just understanding. We started grabbing coffee after class. It wasn't romantic at first, and I liked that. It was slow. Real. She asked about my work, my favorite books, my dog. She never asked about Cassandra. And when, eventually, I told her about the marriage and the fallout and the strange hotel reunion, she didn't try to comfort me with cliches or act like she could fix it. She just listened. Elise had her own scars. She'd lost a brother to cancer, taken care of her father during his Alzheimer's decline, and rebuilt a career after a decade of being a stay-at-home mom. She wasn't interested in perfect. She liked people with dents. People who'd been dropped and still found ways to hold water. One night, we went to an old bookstore that stayed open until midnight. We walked the aisles with warm cider in hand, flipping through yellowed pages and laughing quietly like teenagers breaking curfew. Somewhere near the travel section, she reached out and touched my hand. Just a touch. Nothing heavy. But it was the first time in years I didn't flinch when someone reached for me. We didn't move fast. We didn't label anything. But week by week, I realized I was looking forward to something again. Not just surviving, living. And that's when I knew I had finally healed. Not because someone new filled the space Cassandra left, but because I had stopped waiting for her to come back and explain why she left. I had given myself permission to let go. A year after the hotel, I got an email. No subject. No message. Just a photo attachment. It was the picture of us she'd tried to return, the one I left behind on that hotel table. Except now, it was torn in half. My side of the photo taped to a wall next to what looked like a postcard that read, "You don't need the whole picture to move on." No name. No signature. But I smiled. Because she was right. I didn't need her half of the story anymore. I had written the rest of mine. These days, I still walk Huxley every morning. I still drink my coffee too late and forget to charge my phone. Elise and I are planning a trip to Ireland, her dream. And when I catch myself laughing with her in the kitchen, watching her dance to a song from the 90s like the floor is hers and hers alone, I realize something I never thought I'd feel again. I'm happy. Not perfect. Not fixed. But whole. The kind of whole that comes from knowing exactly who you are and who you no longer have to be for someone else. Cassandra once told me I was too sensitive, that I felt everything too deeply. She was right. And thank God for that. Because now I feel this. This peace. This quiet joy. This new chapter one built from nothing but broken pieces. And honestly, it's the best damn thing I've ever made.